Back for another live. It's Tuesday at 3:30. Today's June the 1st. So I did not get a whole lot of questions for this week. And so a friend suggested that I just discuss some local issues that have happened on the island, resulting in some criminal cases. I did get a question. Ryan emailed me, and Ryan's question is, what are some of the issues you see in cases of minors in possession of marijuana, and how does being caught with less than an ounce of marijuana affect a teenager now and for the rest of their life? So the first part of that, what are some issues you see in cases of minors in possession of marijuana? It would be no different than any other possession case that we defend. It would have the same issues. The fact that the person was a minor doesn't necessarily change the analysis unless it was a search at school, in which children have a lesser right to privacy at school. So that would change some search issues. But other than that, it doesn't. Now, I need to give you a disclaimer that I really do not handle juvenile cases. It is very rare. We'll handle a couple a year, maybe. Some years zero. We just don't have time to go to the Juvenile Justice Center since it's not attached to our courthouse. Our docket is healthy enough that we can't split ourselves too thin going to the JJC on a regular basis. Well, so for the second part of your question, I can tell you that the juvenile system is set up to protect the juvenile. So they have more programs than we typically do in adult court that would ensure that the juvenile's record does not follow them into adulthood and beyond. So to answer the second part of your question, it's a teenager getting caught with less than an ounce of marijuana should be worked out in a way, if there are no legal defenses, it should be worked out in a way where it definitely will not affect that juvenile for the rest of his life. Ryan, I hope that was answered your question enough. If you have any more specific questions, you can email me again and I'll go into more detail about it. And Shorty didn't ask any questions this week, so I don't have any from Shorty. But we can talk about some recent events in Galveston that were, I guess you could say, big events that led to arrests and some controversy locally. One of them was Slab weekend, which slabs are the cars with the rims that stick out. They call them swangers. They have car clubs in Houston and other places that there are people that are enthusiasts of that type of vehicle, and they're typically spent a lot of money on their vehicle. They have high dollar paint jobs. Rims are very expensive. They're just very custom cars. They have, for the past couple of years, had events where they come to Galveston and just ride the seawall, just kind of ride around town. It's their cars. They're just showing them off. Galveston takes the position that since they don't seek a permit for their event, it's a problem because it causes traffic congestion and other problems that the police aren't prepared for because there was no permit application. So on this last one, Galveston ended up, according to reports in the paper, towing over 100 cars that weekend. I think the total was 103, and I think the biggest day was Saturday, and I think they towed 70 something. And of course, there were pictures on social media of the police measuring the width of the rims, let's say, to determine whether or not they violated state law, and if so, apparently they were having the vehicles towed. So what authorities were relying on was a rule that says a typical vehicle cannot be more than 8 feet in width. So if the swangers or the rims were sticking out to the point that it made the vehicle's width more than 8 feet, apparently they were towing their vehicles. Now, as far as arrests, that weekend did not seem to yield a very high number of arrests. I think there were about 33. And to be perfectly frank with you, I've not been contacted by anyone who was arrested on Slab weekend for anything related to a Slab vehicle. So it would be hard for me to speculate what those people went through because I haven't talked to anyone specifically about it. My suspicion would be if those 30 plus arrests were from towed vehicles, my suspicion is going to be it's because of something they found in the vehicle. I do know from another media account that I think one person was arrested for driving on a suspended license, minor. In other words, it was an event that caused a lot of social media attention, and then later activists claimed that they felt it was based on race because many of the car aficionados into these types of vehicles are people of color, and so they wanted to say that it was about race and not about fair policing. And of course the chief denounced that. But there we are. That was Slab weekend. It didn't seem to result in a lot of arrests of substantial criminal offenses. It was just apparently the police don't want them here without notice, causing traffic jams and whatnot with no way to deal with it. So I guess the takeaway is the city wants them to, if they're going to come back, to seek a permit to have an event on the island, and then they can beef up policing and whatnot and traffic control. Okay, so then another big one that we had, which is not so much on the island, but across the ferry on Crystal Beach, the Bolivar Peninsula, was Jeep weekend. Jeep weekend, in contrast, was not about towing vehicles or a permitless event. It was just, I guess it gets too rowdy. And I know that on Jeep weekend this year, which I believe is always the weekend after Mother's Day, they arrested over 200 people. Now from that, we have been hired on several cases stemming from an arrest on Jeep weekend. It's also called Go Topless weekend. We've been contacted by several people that were charged with DWI. I look at the arrests when there are big events, and I saw that a lot of the arrests were for what we would call petty offenses, minor in possession of alcohol, stuff like that. Not a whole lot of serious arrests. It was mainly involving alcohol and disorderly conduct type of stuff. Not a lot of big felony offenses. But in years past, there have been issues with too many intoxicated people being on the beach, driving, causing accidents, people getting hurt. There have been instances of people getting killed in automobile accidents on Jeep weekend. So Galveston County tries to step up law enforcement presence during Jeep weekend so as to avoid those issues. Again, there was over 200 arrests that weekend. And we have been contacted by several of those people that were arrested. I believe the latest one might have been someone charged with a third DWI, and they're not from here. They were just here for that weekend. And we'll just have to see how the evidence shakes out in all of those. Anytime there's a big event and there's a lot of arrests, as a defense attorney, we have to question whether or not, was there actually sufficient evidence for an arrest and charges, or was the officer just trying to get this person off the beach or off the street at that time because he or she thought that was the safest decision at the moment. Doesn't necessarily mean that charges would stick and last. Incidentally, we still have a case that is set for trial that was from last year's Jeep weekend, and it was a DWI. So whenever these big events happen, it brings up a spike in certain types of local charges, and it has an effect on us here at the office, getting hired for those and having to deal with them and go through all the evidence, which sometimes can be a little more challenging because the officers that work the extra job may or may not be certified in certain areas that we think are qualified to handle these things. And so it just takes a little bit more work on our part. So in trying to figure out other local things that we would talk about, I guess some big things here in the paper, obviously this issue of whether or not people will be allowed to carry handguns without any special permits, training, or background checks. And it's a difficult situation. I do have a license to carry, and so I have been through the training and I know the value of it. At the same time, I've been a hunter and I've just known gun safety basically my whole life, so it's a different type of issue for me. What some people get wrong in the analysis, though, is when they say people run around on social media, especially saying that people are going to be carrying a gun without any type of background check. And that's not necessarily true because they still have to purchase the handgun. So they're still going to have to fill out the paperwork and go through the check if they're purchasing it legally. Now, of course, the counter is, well, what if they're purchasing them illegally? Well, someone who's purchasing guns illegally is likely to carry the gun anyway, whether or not there are requirements to get training or not. That's the whole point. So the one thing that's being missed is we're addressing what law-abiding citizens can do and not really addressing what people who are not law-abiding citizens do. So that's what makes this a hotter topic. At the same time, I don't really want to start seeing everyone carrying a gun everywhere I go. Just not safe. In public, as you see with road rage incidents and everything else, that now we're going to give everyone a gun. It just seems like a powder keg and probably not a good idea. I don't know what the purpose for this legislation was, other than for Texas to say, we're so far to the right, we want everyone to just walk around with their gun on their side like the old days. I don't know. But it appears that we're about to enter that situation, and I guess we'll just see how it plays out. What else was big lately? There was a contractor who was charged, I guess, with defrauding people, taking money for construction projects and not doing the work or not completing the work, who had initially been set to plead and get probation. There was some public pushback from some of the victims, apparently, and at the last minute, that gentleman decided that he did not want to plead guilty and take the probation, but he wants to go to a jury trial. So that'll be interesting to see how that case plays out. I'm not sure who his attorney is or will be, because if I remember correctly, he said that he told the court he wanted to withdraw his guilty plea and hire a new lawyer. So we'll see where that goes. There was a recent murder trial that the trials are interesting because since we're getting back to trials from COVID, it's just interesting to see how it plays out. I've talked about that before. But we recently had someone get 80 years for a 2017 League City murder. And, you know, that just shows you what the juries we've been encountering on punishment post-COVID have seemed to have been giving stiff sentences. I guess another case that is popular right now and a lot of people are watching is that there was a man alleged to have been a sex offender who may have died as a result of several people beating him. I can't talk about that case really too much. I represent one of the individuals charged in that case. But as the evidence in that case unfolds, it's likely to be a very interesting case with some unique issues. We'll see. That it's about a week old, so we don't know a whole lot yet. So that's about all I got for today. I don't see any questions in the comments. So I hope you'll have a good rest of your week. And do like Ryan did and email me or contact here when I'm on, and I'll try to answer any questions that y'all have. Thanks a lot. Have a good week.